The world teaches you a simple equation: work more, earn more, trade hours for money. Repeat the cycle, a clean system that appears fair, stable, and logical. But beneath that simplicity is a hidden constraint, a structure that quietly limits your upside while fully exposing your time, your energy, and your life to linear returns. You give effort, you receive proportional reward. You work 40 hours, you get paid for 40 hours. No more, no less. Your input defines your output, and your output is capped by design. This is the game most people are placed into without question, a system of symmetry where risk and reward move together in equal measure, predictable, controlled, and fundamentally limited. The 1% do not reject work, they reject this structure. They understand that the problem is not effort, but the equation effort is applied to. And instead of playing a linear game, they operate within a different framework entirely, one built on asymmetry, where the downside is tightly controlled, capped, and often insignificant, while the upside remains open, unbounded, and capable of scaling far beyond the initial input. The 1% do not reject work, they reject this structure. They understand that the problem is not effort, but the equation effort is applied to. And instead of playing a linear game, they operate within a different framework entirely, one built on asymmetry, where the downside is tightly controlled, capped, and often insignificant, while the upside remains open, unbounded, and capable of scaling far beyond the initial input. They do not ask how hard they can work, they ask a more precise question. What is the maximum possible return for the smallest acceptable risk? And this single shift in thinking changes everything, because it forces you to evaluate not just what you do, but how outcomes are structured around your actions. Most people never make this shift, and as a result, they fall into predictable traps, systems that appear to offer escape, but are mathematically flawed. Gambling, a high-interest debt, speculative trading without a defined edge, all of these promise asymmetry, the illusion of risking little for massive gain, but in reality, they invert the equation. The downside becomes catastrophic, while the upside is uncertain, and often controlled by forces outside your understanding. You risk everything for something that is not guaranteed, and over time, this structure collapses, not dramatically, but gradually. Capital erodes, time is lost, clarity disappears, and eventually, you are pulled back into the original system. Back into trading time for stability, repeating the cycle under the illusion that there is no alternative. But the alternative exists, and it begins with understanding asymmetric edge, a concept that is simple in definition but powerful in application. You risk something small, something you can afford to lose without consequence, in exchange for the possibility of something disproportionately large, something that can multiply your input many times over. The key is control. You define the downside in advance. You cap it, you make it manageable, often limited to time, small capital, or focused effort, and then you position yourself in environments where the upside is not capped, where success can scale without requiring equivalent increases in input. This is where digital systems become powerful, building something that exists independently of your continuous effort, a channel without a face, a piece of software, a digital product, something that once created can operate, distribute, and grow without requiring your presence every hour it produces results. The cost to begin is small, a few hours of focused work, a limited amount of energy, perhaps a modest financial investment, and if it fails, the loss is contained. You lose what you were prepared to lose. Nothing more, no long-term damage, no irreversible consequence. But if it succeeds, the outcome breaks the linear model entirely. One piece of work begins to produce results repeatedly. Attention scales, distribution expands, and suddenly, your input is no longer tied directly to your output. The system begins to work for you, not because of luck, but because it was designed to scale. This is the essence of asymmetry, a controlled downside paired with an open upside, and it does not require certainty, it requires repetition. Because when losses are small and contained, You gain the ability to attempt multiple times, each attempt an experiment, each failure a contained cost, each success a potential outlier that compensates for all previous losses. This is how the math works, not through perfection, but through iteration. Not through avoiding failure, but through structuring failure so that it cannot destroy you. While success has the potential to transform your entire trajectory. The barrier for most people is not intelligence or access, it is fear. But fear is rarely based on reality. It is based on undefined outcomes, on the inability to clearly see what could go wrong. And when the mind cannot define the downside, it exaggerates it, turning small risks into perceived threats. The Stoics approached this differently. They defined the worst case with precision. They reduced uncertainty by bringing clarity to loss. And once the worst-case scenario is known, measured, and accepted, fear loses its power, because there is nothing left to imagine. If the worst case is losing a few hours, a small amount of money, or temporary discomfort, then the decision becomes rational, not emotional. And when decisions are rational, action becomes consistent. You are no longer waiting for confidence, you are operating based on structure. This creates a form of freedom, not the absence of risk, but independence from fear. You are no longer manipulated by the need for security. You are no longer confined to systems that extract your time in exchange for limited returns. You begin to act with clarity, with calm, with a level of detachment that allows you to focus on long-term outcomes rather than short-term discomfort. From this foundation, execution becomes strategic, because the goal is not to abandon stability, but to combine it with asymmetry in a controlled way. This is where the barbell strategy emerges, a structure that balances security and opportunity without allowing one to destroy the other. The majority of your energy remains anchored in something stable, a job, a business, a reliable source of income that covers your baseline, your living expenses, your essential needs. This is not a limitation, it is protection. It ensures that your downside remains secure, that your survival is not dependent on uncertain outcomes. But a smaller portion of your energy, your time, your focus is directed toward asymmetric opportunities. Systems where the downside is limited, but the upside is expansive. Digital assets, scalable ideas, experiments that can grow beyond your direct input. This balance is critical because it allows you to take calculated risks without exposing yourself to collapse. You are stable enough to survive, but flexible enough to grow. And over time, as these asymmetric bets begin to produce results, the balance shifts, not suddenly, but gradually, as one successful system begins to outweigh the stability that once supported it. This is how transitions happen, not through reckless leaps, but through structured evolution, where risk is always defined, always controlled, and always aligned with potential reward. And when viewed through this lens, the path becomes clear. You're not trying to escape work. You're trying to redesign how work translates into outcomes. You're not avoiding effort. You're optimizing where that effort is placed, ensuring that each unit of input has the potential to generate disproportionate returns. Because, in the end, the difference is not effort, it is structure. Most people spend their lives inside systems where the upside is capped and the downside is fully exposed, while a small percentage operate within systems where the downside is controlled and the upside is limitless. And once you understand this, the question is no longer whether you can work harder, but whether you are willing to think differently, to act deliberately, to place your time and energy into structures that allow for exponential outcomes rather than linear ones. Build your edge, refine it, repeat it, and over time, allow the mathematics of asymmetry to work in your favor. And if you are ready to think in systems, to operate with clarity, and to step beyond the limitations of linear thinking, then subscribe and continue learning how to structure your life, your work, and your decisions like the 1%, because the algorithm is not hidden. It is simply ignored, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it.